Well, good afternoon. I am Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show that tries to make the world safe for ADHD. I am a clinical neuropsychologist in private practice. A half to two-thirds of everything I do is about ADHD, mostly at this stage of the game about evaluations, but I have 20 plus years doing primarily therapy and another 10 years, maybe not so much. Anyway, and I'm also the parent of an ADHD child. And I learned more from that one than anything the other two taught me by a long shot. Okay? When we first realized that there was something going on that we didn't understand with our youngest, we looked for information, and I'm a psychologist. That should be easy, right? It's a psychological condition? Well, actually, it's not. It's a neurologic condition. But I managed to make it through an entire graduate program in clinical psychology that is approved by the American Psychological Association without once hearing about ADHD. Not one time did I hear anything about that. And the research was just not very solid, and in spite of the fact that this has been formally treated with stimulant medications since the 1930s, in spite of that, and in spite of the fact that it was first described in the medical literature in the 1700s, in spite of that, there was surprisingly little known about ADHD, and there was also surprisingly little consensus that it was actually a thing. A lot of folks for a long time have thought, and some people still do, think that it's mostly boys, and they're just, little boys are always kind of hyper and active and da-da-da-da-da. Not true. And they also think, it's just parents aren't very good at what they do. Probably shouldn't have had kids. No, it's got nothing to do with the parenting style. No, it's got nothing to do with mom's diet during the pregnancy. It's a neurologic condition. It's hereditary. It's passed down from generation to generation at roughly an 85% clip. The heritability index is 85%, which, if you know anything about this sort of thing, you know that is extraordinarily high. Okay, that is almost 100%. That's about as close as you get to 100%. So, we know it actually exists. We know it's a neurologic condition, not a psychological condition. It is not the result of poor learning, poor parenting, a learning disability, da-da-da-da-da. You're born with it. Your brain is just a little bit different from neurotypical brains. That's it. Basically, I honestly think the biggest problem we have with ADHD is we keep trying to make ADHDers act like neurotypicals. And there's no way. It is never going to happen. No matter what you do, your child will always be a little different from a neurotypical child. And as a parent, it's kind of up to you to embrace that difference and learn how to work with it. And one of the things I want to talk about today is, I think a couple of weeks ago I talked about you have to externalize the executive functions that ADHDers have problems with. That sounds very convoluted and complicated and all that. All it means is that ADHDers have notoriously poor senses of time. So they need a timer. That's externalizing the executive part of things. It's not that terribly complicated. They're lousy with organization. That's why organizational charts, moving the magnetic thing from one column to the other when they get something done is important. You have externalized organization. Okay? A lot of people think that's a behavior modification. It's not. It's not really. It's adapting the environment and adjusting it to the ADHD child. I have a sort of a plus-minus thing with behavior modification in general. I think that you have to have the basic concepts in mind that, and it's, good Lord, it's not very complicated. You reward what you like, and you punish what you don't like. Problem is, of course, that most of us forget to reward what we like. He's quiet. God, let's just leave him alone. And we don't. When we say punish doesn't have to, be a big deal. It can be just a little, hey, that wasn't good. Don't do that again, okay? That can be the punishment, okay? But talking about the externalizing of the executive functions that kids have troubles with, I'm not sure if it's my term or not. I think it is. I have a thing called horizontal organization. The world is there are two kinds of people. There are people like me, and like probably most of us, that are vertical organizers. Everything is alphabetized, it's in a file folder, it's in the right drawer of a file cabinet. That's how we organize. That's what we're comfortable with, and that's how we know how to find stuff. ADHDers, because their working memory is so doggone weak. Okay, working memory is just the ability to keep information in awareness. It's not like you're actually trying to memorize something. It's you just keeping it in awareness. It's like when you get up from the family room and go to the bedroom. Do you remember what you went for, or do you forget along the way? Okay, this is... Some folks of a certain age are going, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Okay. Part of it is an age thing, but for ADHDers, they start right off the bat with this problem. And it's it makes everything a little bit tougher. It makes learning tougher, because part of the learning process is, first you get the information in working memory, then you go back and analyze the long-term memory files for similar information so you know where to mesh the information. Well, if by the time you get done with the history files, the working memory thing has disappeared, you got to reintroduce the working memory thing. Okay? It makes learning a lot more difficult, a lot more time-consuming. I've never had an ADHDer in my office who didn't say, man, I had to work twice as hard as everybody else to get any kind of grades at all in school. And that's part of the reason why. Having weak working memory is a really big deal, and it really affects your ability to learn rapidly. And it also, a lot of times you'll be misdiagnosed with some other kind of learning problem that maybe you don't really have. It could just totally be the ADHD. Okay. Horizontal. Okay, we talked about vertical organizers, which probably most of us neurotypicals are. Horizontal organizers are people, and you've probably been in some of their homes. Every flat surface has got a pile on it of something. Piles of papers, piles of envelopes, piles of stuff. But the proud owner of these piles knows exactly where everything is and can find it. Okay, well, if you're raised a certain way, that just means you're a slob, okay? Or you're disorganized, or you whatever. I think I've said before, my father was a drill instructor in the World War II Army. We were tight and tidy people. We did not have piles. Everything was put away. Everything was put away to the extent that sometimes the house didn't look like anybody lived there. But that's a whole different thing. The deal, though, with an ADHD person is if they can't see it, they're afraid they're going to totally forget about it. Okay, and that's that working memory thing. So I was talking to a woman. I think I told everybody that I just got back from a conference. I was talking to a woman who found out I do ADHD, and like usually happens at these conferences, started asking me questions about her kid and her husband and all that other stuff. I told her about the horizontal organization thing, and she kind of went, "Oh, you're talking about my husband. That's exactly what he does." And, she had been blaming him for being a slob, not realizing that it's the weakness in working memory that makes him want to be able to see everything and double check it all the time and remind himself, that this is over in the pile on the piano, and this is over in the pile on the butcher block, and this is over in the pile on the sideboard, and this is the pile on the coffee table, and of course there's the pile on my desk. It is an attempt to compensate for weak working memory. If you feel called upon to do something about that so there aren't so many piles or so it doesn't look so darn sloppy, one of the things I know that works and helps make it easier is to get clear, usually plastic tubs that you can see into, and put the stuff in those plastic tubs. Then you can stack them up in a corner off of the thing. But you want to organize it so that by categories of whatever works. If it's school, a math tub and a history tub and an English tub and so on. And you might even want to, ADHDers a lot of times don't code things alphabetically. They like colors. So if, say, math is red and history's green and, something like that, fine, it's not a problem. Just go with it. Understand why that is. And again, for ADHDers, color stands out in ways that numbers or letters just don't. There's nothing about colors that, a person who's neurotypical would go, "Oh, what's the big deal? That doesn't matter." I have seen people with personal schedules using 4 or 5 different colored pens. "Oh, this is, for appointments, and this is just for things I gotta do, and this is just for," they've got a whole different way of looking at stuff figured out. And woe be unto you to try to change that, okay? Because they are not going to change. If they've got a system set up, that's their system, and they're going to stick with it. And as a matter of fact, one of the problems in my area is that the school system gives out all these neat and tidy organizers. And it's just a regular organizer, with hours for the day and space to write what homework is due, and a lot of times, perhaps most of the time even, an ADHD kid just will not use that. It is complicated in a way he or she has trouble fathoming, has trouble understanding. So it's harder for them to use than it would be for a neurotypical kid. And you, as a parent, probably need to get an accommodation that allows them to organize it their own way. If they just need a pad full of blank paper and a bunch of different colored pencils, fine, whatever works. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get something that works. And as long as you keep in mind the central idea that you are externalizing the executive weaknesses they have, the things they can't keep in their mind, you put out there and make it physical. That's your job as a parent, to help them with that. And good luck, because I know you don't exactly know all this stuff, know what we're doing, and exactly how to externalize it. But if you can kind of hold that thought in your mind when you're looking at them do something that you just kind of go, what? Or maybe something that they're doing that you used to get yelled at when you were a kid. That tells us probably a lot about where the ADHD came from. But you've got to be able to stop yourself and think, no, what is it that makes him want to do it that way? Why do it that way? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the more neurotypical you are, if you are one of those people who married into a whole family of ADHDers, first of all, good luck. It's quite a wild ride. But if you did, then it's harder to understand, because we're all patterns. People are basically just a walking collection of habit patterns. This is the way I write. This is the way I organize information. This is the way I get dressed in the morning. This is, the whole thing. We have all these patterns, and we're all used to thinking that this is the normal way the world works. And then you see your kid do something totally, different. And the tendency is to just go, oh, don't do it that way. Come on, this is much faster. I invite you to think a little bit and watch a little bit before you go off on that, because you're probably going to have problems with that approach to things. You're probably going to get a lot of resistance. You're probably going to get a kid throwing a temper tantrum, and when they know that the world doesn't understand them, this is what leads to real problems when they get to be teenagers. World doesn't understand me. I don't fit in. Screw all these people. I'm not going to do it. And you get all this passive-aggressive stuff that is ultimately self-harming. That gets them into trouble for themselves. Okay? Doesn't matter about you being embarrassed or any of that stuff. That's an issue, and I would be lying if I said my child's behavior never embarrassed me. But you can't let that be the issue. You got to be thinking that you have to keep ahead of them a little bit. You have to make sure the world understands their idiosyncrasies. That didn't come out right, but anyway, you know what I mean. That they do stuff a little differently, that's okay. Most of the time their friends it won't bother them a bit. As long as it gets the job done, that's all that matters. And I prefer thinking of things as externalizing their executive problems rather than think of it as behavior modification. But it's all, a lot of it is about the charts and the stars and the magnets and that sort of thing, because it gives them an external thing to identify. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I still got this to do. Okay, that's what you're shooting for. But also remember that the horizontal organization is part of the game, and it's part of their need to make up for a weak working memory by being able to see that the stuff is there, by being able to, oh yeah, I remember that, just by looking at it. I know for most of us who are neurotypicals, that would be like, what? That is so inefficient. That doesn't make any sense. But we have normal working memory. We know that we can, oh yeah, I put that in, it was in, the second file drawer down in the the folder called written ADHD. Whatever. But that's how most of the world organizes. ADHDers, horizontal organizers, or flat surface organizers, or whatever you want to call them. They need to be able to see it to be reminded that it exists. Okay. This has been a little bit complicated, but if you think of it, understanding that ADHD, first of all, probably isn't the best name in the world for this disorder, because it's got to do with more than just attention. It also has to do with executive functioning. And executive functioning is all the stuff that goes into making decisions, making plans, initiating plans, correcting plans when they don't work out, and, managing them to conclusion. Roughly, okay? That was kind of quick and dirty, but that's what executive functioning basically is. It's how you make decisions, develop plans, and initiate and complete the plans. ADHDers are notoriously weak in executive functioning. We tend to focus on attention because they have troubles concentrating, but that's basically more of the executive function of controlling attention than it is that they can't pay attention at all, because we all know if they like something, they can pay attention to it like crazy, as in video games, say. If they can pay attention to stuff they like, they have a horrible time paying attention to stuff that people keep telling them they should do. They just have a hard time with that. But keeping in mind that you want to externalize all the areas of executive functioning that they have weaknesses that you've observed, and you want to understand the horizontal organization phenomenon. Okay? Doesn't mean your home can't be, well, it doesn't have to be sloppy. Let's just put it that way. You can do some things that keep it a little bit more orderly and but understand, that's not the deal. You don't want to raise a kid just to raise a kid who keeps his room clean, because he'll be 40 years old and he'll still be keeping his room clean in your house. You want a kid who gets stuff done, who knows how to go out there in the world and do things, and who has confidence. Okay? That's what you're training, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. This has been Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show for trying to make the world safe for ADHD. Remember, ADHDers tend to be outside-the-box thinkers. The outside-the-box thinkers are the folks who change the world. So maybe we'll be lucky and one of your kids will solve one of the world's problems, like global warming or something. Okay, I will catch you next time. I can be reached at terrygingrasphd.com. You can leave messages somewhere around here, this thing, and we'll catch you next week.